Hi, my name is Doug, and I'm in recovery. Sure, there is a modicum of recovery from sleep deprivation and jet lag. It's about a 6-hour difference between here and Rwanda. Wally has permission to fall asleep during the sermon. Are you staying through the whole sermon again? You may, but you don't need to. So if he slips out, you'll know that he needs a nap. He's an old guy. We're actually the same age, and we've known each other for 47 years. That's a long time. It's amazing. It's pretty amazing. My real recovery isn't, though, from those things. It's not so much from the long trip itself and the distance and the jet lag and the 6-hour time difference. My real recovery, I think, is that of being sort of jolted out of one culture and plopped back into another. And I don't think I was internally, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, add in whatever adverb or adjective you'd like, ready for that re-entry. Both cultures seem in some fuzzy, weird way like only a distant memory. I'm not quite back home yet. And it feels like even though we only left a few days ago, it feels like Rwanda is a distant memory already. It's an odd space to be. It's sort of that, having just gotten back Tuesday evening, it's sort of like, at least for me, and maybe you, Pastor Wally, I don't know, are in that sort of unreal, kind of an ethereal space of re-entry. It's re-entry into a different culture, a different communal life, a different set of resources, different expectations, and dramatically different level of affluence and all of that. But most of all, it feels like a different capacity for sustained spiritual expectation. It feels like, it seems like a seemingly different capacity for sustained amazement at the beauty and wonder of Jesus. I'm still testing that. I'm not sure. It's not meant to be a judgmental observation. It's just meant to be, there's a difference. And I feel it. If you were in coffee conversation, you heard Deb Benedict reference a Faust sharing with us, about the things like the clock on the wall or the wristwatch on your arm, when he would say things like, in Rwanda, we don't have a watch, we have time. And even that, that just sort of drives my North American sensibilities up the wall. Let's get going, right? Maybe you're not like that, but I know most of you. And I think you are. And so I'm especially drawn to this gospel passage today because it's a case study. It's a case study. By the way, Pastor Wally and I were required by the Council of Education in Rwanda to prepare final exams. Wally for diaconal ministry, mine for advanced systematic theology, final exams in which there were case studies so that on that part of the exam, the student had to be able to integrate, be able to apply and integrate, sort of like Bloom's taxonomy. Some of you know that sort of thing and figure out how to do that. So case studies in our minds. And here's a case study right here in today's gospel passage. It's a case study about the relationship between having a capacity for amazement and the likelihood of my experiencing or noticing the work of God in my life. A case study in the relationship between having a capacity for amazement and the likelihood of my experiencing or noticing the work of God in my life or in the world. The gospel passage unfolds in two scenes, and interestingly, they're mirror images each of the other in some very important ways. One of the scenes, scene one, is about the ministry of Jesus. Scene number two is about the ministry and the mission of the 12 apostles. Scene number one has Jesus in his hometown. Some of you, most of you here know that story. But three little words sort of pop off the page for me in that passage. The first is there in verse 2. It's the little word astounded. The second is in the next verse, verse 3. It doesn't take very long. The word is to take offense. And the third is in verse 6, and it's the word amazed. The people, back up in verse 2, having heard Jesus teach, having watched him minister, were astounded at the wisdom of Jesus' teaching. I mean, they apparently had not heard anything quite like this, and they were amazed. Astounded. It's a word that could be translated to be at a loss, to be dumbfounded. They're just sort of struck in this unexpected display of wisdom and knowledge and power in Jesus. But then in the space of one verse, their amazement turned quickly to skepticism. It says that they took offense. It literally can mean stumbled, to fall over something. They stumbled over him. They were amazed at first, but then all of a sudden, something kicked in their brain, and they stumbled and were scandalized by him. They turned to be skeptics. And notice it was precisely Jesus' plainness, Jesus' ordinariness, Jesus, the familiarity they had with Jesus that caused them to stumble. It says he's only a teknon. That is, he's a tradesperson. He's a carpenter or a stonemason. We would say he's just a blue-collar worker. He's not been to university. He's from a family right here in the neighborhood. And that amazement that was at a high peak in verse 2 is now dissipated by stumbling over Jesus' familiarity and ordinariness. The upshot's there in verse 5, and it's striking and it's sobering and it's incredible. It's hard to believe, that is. And for the theologians in the room who want to push hard that Jesus was fully divine, and he was, we're going to recite it and confess it in the creed shortly. But it does say Jesus could not, not able to do miracles there except to heal a few. That somehow there was a connection between the people's lack of amazement, lack of faith, and his ability to do miracles among them. And then the tables are turned in some ways by the time you get to verse 6, where it now says that, and Jesus was amazed. It's not the exact same word, but it's a synonym of that same word. It says Jesus was amazed. It's a word which could be translated like the first one, astounded or astonished or shocked. Jesus himself was now amazed at their lack of faith. And that's scene number 1. Wonder what else would have happened in Nazareth. I wonder what else would have happened in Nazareth had they not stumbled over Jesus' ordinariness. We'll never know. Scene number 2 is the mission of the 12. It begins, though, with a transition phrase at the very end of verse 6. And it says that Jesus left his hometown and went on to other villages. And it goes on to say that having removed himself from those who had lost their capacity for amazement, he continued to teach. That is, he continued to do the very thing that he had come to Nazareth in the first place to do. And moreover, he sent his disciples out to do the same thing, 2 by 2. You go here, you go here, you go here. And spreading out across those villages in that region. Notice the mirroring of scene 1 in scene 2. Jesus is very specific in laying this out to send out these disciples, these apostles in scene number 2, to drive home the point that his divine authority is given to ordinary people in verse 7. It's specifically noted that their authority is not of their own. They don't do this with their own stuff, with their own wisdom, with their own power, with their own ability. It's a derivative authority that they have. These are the most unlikely candidates for great things. I mean, for all anybody knew, they could have been from Nazareth. And can anything good come from there? The ordinariness is emphasized. And they were only to go, Jesus says, notice, they were only to go where there was welcome, where there was receptivity, where there was expectation, where there was a capacity for amazement. That's where they were to go. And lacking that, lacking welcome, receptivity, expectation, a capacity for amazement, they were told just to keep on moving. Go on to the next place. And in direct contrast to the little word few in scene 1 in verse 5. Verse 13 wraps up scene 2 by doubly emphasizing that these disciples, ordinary people being sent out with derivative authority to places where they were welcomed, it's doubly emphasized that they were able to serve many. They cast out many demons and cured many illnesses. Apparently, all related to a capacity for amazement. My name is Doug, and I'm in recovery. And I'm asking what it might mean to recover a capacity for amazement in this culture, in this place, in our world. What might it mean to recover a capacity for amazement? It strikes me that one of the most marked features of the gospel accounts, you can do a word study on this, just grab your concordance. One of those marked features of the gospel accounts is that where Jesus' ministry was able to flourish, that common, ordinary people were amazed. Here's a few. People were amazed at Jesus' teaching in the synagogue. Luke says it this way: "Then he went down to Capernaum, a town in Galilee, and on the Sabbath he taught the people, and they were amazed at his teaching because he had the words of one with authority. And in Matthew's gospel, at the end of a very, very long sermon, even longer than this one, the people were amazed. When Jesus had finished these things, saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching because he taught as one who had authority and not as one of their teachers of the law. And in the boat, when he calmed the storm, the disciples were amazed at his power. Matthew records that the men were amazed and asked, "What kind of person is this, that even the winds and the waves obey him?" And his actions of spiritual warfare, people were amazed at how Jesus drove out demons. In the following chapter of Matthew, and when the demon was driven out, the man who had been mute spoke, and the crowd was amazed and said, "Nothing like this has ever been seen in Israel." They were amazed by the things he did. Matthew also records in chapter 15 that great crowds came to him, bringing the lame and the blind and the crippled and the mute and many others, and laid those people at Jesus' feet, and he healed them. The people were amazed when they saw the mute speaking and the crippled made well and the lame walking and the blind seeing, and they praised the God of Israel. What might it mean to recover a capacity for amazement? What might it mean to recover a faith that truly believes in the possibility of the miraculous? That truly believes that Jesus is present and at work in some way in our lives and in our world? What might it mean to become a place of radical welcoming, not only horizontally of welcoming the other, that certainly, but a fresh welcoming of the good news of Jesus? What might it mean? I don't have an answer fully for that question. But as I listen to the promptings and stirrings of my heart, I can't help but think that a recovering of the amazement in the majesty, wisdom, beauty, and authority of Jesus might mean at least something like this. That it might mean a recovery of a capacity for wonder. A capacity to believe that things can happen out of the box that we cannot understand. To believe that there might actually be burning bushes around us somewhere if we only had the eyes to see. It would be a freshness, a recovery of a freshness in relationship with Jesus. What would it be like to get to know Jesus again? Joyce and I celebrate 50 years in December of marriage. I hope we do a renewal of wedding vows. We haven't talked about it yet, so don't let the secret out. But you know, relationships don't just stay the same. I remember at the age of 18 when I finally said sort of that final yes to Jesus. I had one of those, some of you will remember them. It was a big old padded, I have no idea why it was padded, but it was a living Bible. You remember it was green, ugly. You remember that thing? It was ugly. And somebody gave me a yellow highlighter. And I think I highlighted virtually every page of the New Testament. Because it just blew me over. How do we recover a freshness in our relationship with Jesus? How do we relearn to delight in Jesus' presence. Those of us in the room who are in a relationship with a significant other, spouse, someone else, how do you recover that sense of delight in that other person? How do you recover that sense of delight, in this case, in Jesus? It might mean a fresh surrender in to and a reliance on God's power. It might mean a fresh welcoming embrace for Jesus himself. Friends, I'm in recovery. And I want to recover capacity to be amazed. I hope you do too. Amen.